Hi, this is Jeff Schiffman, co-owner of Boombox Library, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to get creative with the Robotic Creations heads-up display sound design toolkit. So let's get started. There are two main sections here of your TouchOSC layout. The first is the main toolbar along the top of the iPad screen, and the second are the 6 different modules that you'll use to control the sound. Interface, power up and power down, fail and success, alarm, countdown, and data readout. You'll find 5 gray tabs here at the top of your iPad screen, and each is labeled with a different robot personality. Now, when you tap a tab, the robot personality's layout will open, and the corresponding robot name will appear in the box below. All the modules are the same across all robot personality tabs. There won't be a visual change other than the displayed name of the robot. However, the sounds triggered underneath are all different. Keep an eye on the label so you know which robot sounds you're working with. Each robot personality tab controls a different instrument within Contact Multi, and if you're using Pro Tools to monitor and record, you'll see a separate MIDI track is communicating that robot's MIDI data. Up here at the top is the Options menu. Here you can connect to your Wi-Fi under the Connections heading. You'll need your computer and iPad on the same Wi-Fi network. You'll also want to make sure under the Layout section here that you choose the Robotic Creations Heads-Up Display Toolkit TouchOSC layout. The teal text at the top tells you the collection and sound effects library which the Sound Design Toolkit belongs. This particular one belongs to Robotic Creations Collection and Heads-Up Display Library. The current time and battery life are displayed as 2 white rectangles in the upper right-hand side of the layout. Now let's dive into the different modules. Now all the modules contain either trigger or toggle buttons, plus a variety of other modulation controls. Keep in mind that the modulation controls only become active once they've been touched. Before that time, they'll operate at nominal value for that sample. For example, the volume will default to full volume until you adjust the volume slider. First, we've got the interface section over here. Now the interface section has randomized sound trigger push buttons. Now each trigger button appears as a square with a number inside it. Tap the button to trigger the samples in this section. Each interface beep file from our Robotic Creations heads-up display sound effects library has its own trigger button. Pressing the button will randomly play a different variation from that interface beep file. Holding the button will not result in more than one sample being triggered. You must tap the button a new time to trigger the next sample variation. The left slider below the trigger button controls the volume for that particular sample. It defaults to the top position, which is full volume. The slider is only activated once it's been adjusted. Now the right slider below the trigger button controls the linked pitch and time modulation for that particular sample. It defaults to the center position, which is nominal. Move the slider up to pitch up and speed up the sample, and move it down to pitch down and slow down the sample. Next up, we've got power up and power down, as well as fail and success beeps. And just like the interface beeps, these control randomized sound trigger buttons. Just to the left of these are the volume sliders. Each volume slider controls the volume of the trigger button it is next to. Now the alarm section over here contains sound on-off toggle buttons. I'll switch to Gregory for this one. Each sound on-off toggle button appears as a square with a number inside of it. Tap once to begin playback of the sound, and again to cease playback. Each sample activated by a sound on-off toggle button loops seamlessly to create a smooth and continuous playback. The slider to the left controls the volume of that particular sound, and the rotary controls linked pitch and time. The rotaries surrounding the sound on-off toggle button allow you to modulate linked pitch and time with a single movement. Swipe your finger in an arc following the colored portion of the semicircle, and the linked pitch and time of the sample will change with the motion. The data readout section controls the data readout sound files for the selected robot personality. We'll go ahead to Mimo for this one. Now, just as we had with alarm, these readout buttons are on-off toggle buttons. Below each on-off toggle button is a volume slider that controls the volume of that particular sound. The grid below the volume sliders control pitch and time. The x-axis of the grid controls time, while the y-axis, pitch. To activate the XY pad, tap the square marker located in the left of the grid and move it in a fluid motion to change pitch and time in a corresponding fashion. We'll turn on number 2, and the center position in the grid is the location at which both pitch and time are at a nominal value for that sample. It's important to note that, like all other modulation controls in the Sound Design Toolkit, the XY pad is not active until it's been touched. The default visual position of the marker within the grid is the lower left-hand position. However, until the pad's been activated, the sound will play back at nominal pitch and time. Let's show what we mean by that. Turning on. As soon as we start to move it, we get the full range of motion. However, if we want to go back to nominal value, we have to leave it back in the center. Okay, the final section we have here is the countdown section. We'll switch over to Engage. Just like the alarm and data readouts, the countdown section contains on-off toggle buttons for each sound. They also contain its own volume slider, an individual pitch labeled with a P, and time labeled with a T rotaries. These are great and allow you to be really creative because you can control both pitch and time independently just by using 2 different fingers. Now that we've gone over everything, I just want to point out that you can actually design amongst all the different robots at once as you're going along. So while we might want to trigger a countdown beep going on in vintage Q5, we can pop over to Mimo and start playing around with interface beeps. Maybe we want to have an alarm going over here. And some power downs from Mech Suit Firewall. Lastly, we'll throw some data readouts in from Gregory. Keep in mind, if things get a little crazy, you can always click the panic button in Contact, and then go ahead and just reload the layout. You're back to square one. Great, now you know how to use all the different modules, but just for fun, let's do a practical demo. Let's say I want to have a computer sort of space-age room design going on. Well, the cool thing here is I'm not limited to any single personality. These will all trigger at the same time and even record them as separate MIDI tracks within Pro Tools for later editing. So let's start with a little bit of a data readout here from Q5, our vintage robot. Cool. Turn that down a bit. We'll pop over to Engage. Get a countdown. Alright, those work pretty well together. Now we'll load up Firewall. See what kind of data readouts he has. Alright, those are working pretty well. Now we'll load up Firewall. Let this loop for a while and you've got a pretty cool vintage computer background. Want to get even more trippy with it? Load up some alarms and really mangle them. And then if we want to trigger some stuff on top, why not? Welcome to your new sci-fi location. Now that you've learned how easy it is to get creative with your sound design toolkit, you're ready to start designing. If you run into any technical issues while designing, don't forget to refer back to the manual for a comprehensive FAQ and troubleshooting section. Now have fun!